Such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I know you're must be exhausted from all the wonderful conversation, the wonderful worship, all the great workshops that happened throughout this week. I feel blessed to be here and presenting to you this morning. I want to share a little bit about my background. As Marco shared, I am the Executive Director of Philanthropy at CCHF, also the Executive Director of their foundation. A little bit about my professional background. I've spent the last 20 years of my career in grant making. So I had been the funder for most of my career. I spent, during those 20 years, 5 of that in consulting for grant makers and nonprofits. And in that time, I felt God calling me to something new and to something different. And I end up here at CCHF now for 2 years. I've been here, and I didn't have much fundraising experience. And I said, God, are you sure that you are calling me here? Because I feel absolutely unqualified for this job. And he assured me that he had qualified me and that I had stepped into the right place. So in an act of obedience, I am here today. And I think, the prayer is simple. I said, God, always allow me to be in the seat where I can do the greatest good for those with the greatest need. And that is the only qualifier in this room that any of us need. So we are all in this era that is marked with a lot of uncertainty, these political shifts, donors demanding, right, if you're already in the donor space, or it's the first time you're diving into it because there has been a loss in revenue for the first time in the history of your organization. But resilience it's imperative. It's a leadership imperative. It is a mindset that must resonate from your leadership all the way to the person who enters the front door, the front person in the office. I call them the chief energizer officer because they are the first one that someone sees when they come into your clinic, and whatever is happening at that top and whatever sentiment is happening across the organization, they experience it right at that front door. You're going to have some key takeaways today, but of all the things that you will learn, the most important thing that I will share today, so if you have a notepad, this is it. That God is still in the business of doing miracles and answering prayers. And as we talk about this journey of miracles and prayers, I thought about, what is at the core of fundraising and development, having really lived on the other side of the house and having to maneuver this backwards, if you will. And I thought, for those I have relationships with, what was the best part? And the most important thing that you will learn today is the art of storytelling. I was so blessed to hear my peers deliver their presentations on fundraising, and they gave a lot about the technical aspects of it, and those are all important. But at the core of that is the relationship building. And how is that built? It's built through authenticity. Right? It's built through you knowing my story, I know your story, then you know the patient's story, and then you know the history of the organization. All of it is this storytelling concept, which actually really blew my mind because when I came into CCHF, most people will know it today, right, as an almost $200 million federally qualified healthcare center serving over 60,000 patients, 45 specialties. They didn't have a marketing department. And I thought, wow, how are we going to tell this story? So that was one of the first hires that CCHF did. It wasn't even a direct report into my department, but it was one of the most important hires that we would ever do. The other part is sharing the organizational resilience. The fact that all of you are in this room today means you are still here, you're still standing, you're still fighting, and you're still serving. That is the story that you are going to tell your donors and those foundations. Right? Because we're at a time where we see people clawing back on resources, but you're still here standing. You're still here serving. And while we can tell them, it's a delicate balance between telling them the need, telling them, I'm still going to be here in the next 5-10 years, I promise, right? And them thinking, but if I give to you, are you going to go away? Right? It's this delicate dance of the storytelling. The communication strategy, what you're sharing and communicating amongst your C-suite, those in management, those who are at the front door reception, right? What is it that is being communicated to them in these uncertain times to reduce fear and anxiety across the organization? How do you keep your community calm? This is the time that we step up. I was in a presentation recently. I can't tell you how many times I heard the word fear. And I'm sitting across the panel, and every single person giving their, lecture, if you will, was talking about fear and uncertainty. And I said, I'm not experiencing that. I'm experiencing hope. And everyone in the room, you could see the kind of look up and get off their phones. And I said, because there's hope in Jesus. And I just feel so grateful that I get to be in a role now that allows me to express that openly, right? There's often times if you work in a for-profit sector, sometimes you separate that a little bit, right? But I'm blessed to now, I say, God, I see why you called me to this role. The second is that philanthropy is everyone's responsibility across the organization. Strengthening team alignment is essential. From the day they walk into your door at new employee orientation to their last day they retire on the job and become an ambassador for the work you do. It is everyone's responsibility, and we're going to talk about how we do that at SACHEL. And then there's the actionable pieces, right? We have to put all of these things into an action plan. But before we dive into anything, what did I say was the number one takeaway? That God is still in the business of doing miracles and answering prayer. So we're going to open up in prayer today. Dear Lord, as we close our eyes and bow our heads, Father, I'd like to open this session in prayer and ask you to be in the midst of this conversation. I believe those in the room here today are here by divine appointment. I pray an outpouring of blessings and abundance over their lives and their organizations, that they not be moved or shaken by what they see around them. I pray that you strengthen them and give them the peace that surpasses all understanding, Father. May they grow in wisdom today and in courage as they step out in faith and grow your kingdom. Amen. So we talked, right, about the art of storytelling. So when John invited me and I told him I only had 2 years of fundraising experience, I was like, are you sure you asked the right person? Because I'm pretty sure there are 1,000 people that are coming to this workshop that have way more experience than I do. And he says, yes, I'm sure. And I said, okay, well, I'm just going to set the expectations really low then, so they all say I did a good job. But he said, you bring something unique to the table. I said, what's that, John? And he says, a funder's perspective. You've been a funder for 20 years. What the heck goes through your mind? Right? How do you make these decisions? What are the yeses? What are the nos? And it's just driving us all crazy on the other side of that mind. And I said, I'd be happy to share. I talked a little bit about the core of that being relational. So I'm going to share my story with you. I grew up in inland Southern California. That is comprised of Riverside and San Bernardino County. We're about 60 miles east of Los Angeles. I grew up there. I was born in 83, moved there in 84. It was an incredibly robust time in the community that people were moving in from Los Angeles in waves. And what was moving in was a lot of gangs. And different from Los Angeles was there was not marked territory. So there was a lot of gang wars and there was a lot of drugs coming into the community. I was 16 years old, my best friend 18, when they were murdered and shot. That was everyone's story. My sister's best friend was shot and murdered when she was in 6th grade. And so my family says, how do we keep our children safe, right? My dad was a police officer out in Monterey Park, and he's like, well, it's not safe for you to be there because of his job, right? I'm going to bring you into community that I think is safe. So we surrounded ourselves with the church. And I lived there. 2 times Sunday, 1 time Wednesday, then youth on whatever, and then you volunteer, and then there's the Saturday event, and I just lived at church. That was a lot of fun, yes. At the age of 10, though, my family and I embarked on our first missions trip to Mexico. It changed my life. It planted this seed that would forever change my destiny and set my purpose. I remember going into the orphanage, and you think I'm going to take toys and the kids are going to be excited because that's what you get excited about, and clothes and shoes and food. And while they were grateful, I remember most that the kids just were lonely and they wanted to be loved and hugged. It's hard not to get emotional thinking about that moment. I remember telling my mom, Mom, can we just take them all home? Like, I promise I'll be good. I'll share my toys. I won't fight with them like sister. I promise that everything will be okay if we can just bring them home. She assured me that we couldn't for legal reasons, that we would be in trouble. But something was planted in my heart that day. I went into college thinking I would go into law school, right? Just kind of that idea still that you wanted to help, that you wanted to make a difference. And I set that path. And after, taking my LSATs and, turning my letters in for law school, I said, wow, I'm still broke though after college and I need a job. So I go and I get a job at a mortgage company. It's booming then. So this is before the recession, right? It's 2004. The economy's booming. They want to start a philanthropic arm. They learned that I have done this work in ministry with my family and asked if I'd be part of that team that would start the corporate philanthropy arm for that mortgage company. I gladly said yes. Shortly after that was Hurricane Katrina. Anybody in this room remember Hurricane Katrina? Yeah, so I said, absolutely. So we first did those efforts, then it turned to local focus. And I said, oh man, I don't know how I'm going to tell my parents I don't want to go to law school anymore, because I have stepped into what God has intended for my life. So I went home and they were like, wow, we spent a lot of money on private Christian school and LSATs, but if God is calling you, we understand. And they supported the cause. After that, I was blessed to do an 11-year career with one of the wealthiest tribes in the nation, helping facilitate over $100 million in grant making for health and economic and community development in my community and across the nation in Indian country and some of the most impoverished areas. It was such a humbling and rewarding task. One of those grants was to SAC Health, the other to Loma Linda University Health, what would birth the model of what you see SAC Health in Loma Linda today. Not knowing what God had ahead, I thought I was going to retire there at San Manuel. Who doesn't just love to give a lot of money out, right? This is a great job. Everyone's nice to you. And I said, okay, this is it. 11 years into that, I had a very bad accident. And I had to step out of the workforce. And it was many years of recovering from that accident. And I did consulting for 5 years to sort of band-aid the, economic implications of leaving the workforce. And after 5 years and going through a pandemic and being siloed at home, I was finally in a place of physical recovery. And I said, okay, God, what's next? I feel you calling me. And so I went into prayer. And I said, okay, God, I just want to be where the greatest need exists, where I can do the greatest good, and where people are nice. I like to work with nice people. That's just my thing. It was a very simple prayer. But I wasn't, I had received many calls to interview for CEO roles of foundations based on my experience, but I wasn't feeling hopeful that there was true alignment in my heart. I was faced with racist comments from boards and CEO members, gender, race, all the things that you would imagine sort of right in this hierarchy of this world of philanthropy. And I knew that I wasn't called there. So I tell my mentor, I'm not feeling very hopeful about what I'm experiencing. Maybe I just, stay. She said, why don't you take some time off to be in prayer? And I was like, more time? She's like, more time. But stop, be still, and let God and the universe bring to you what is meant for you. So I said, okay, God, I am the main provider of the family, but I'm going to step in faith and let it all go and let God. The next day, I got a call from SAC Health. It's like that moment you let go, like from your lips to God's ears, right? The sincerity of that heart, that act of obedience that He listens and answers prayer. I get that call. I immediately know. I hang up the call. I'm in full-blown tears. I might go to my parents' house. They're both pastors and now global missionaries. And I asked them to pray that God would prepare me for that job. I still had to go through the HR process and, they still had to vote me in and all that fun stuff. But I knew in my heart that God had called me here, and I just hoped that they would see the same. So now we're in a relationship, right? You know my story. part of that relationship is being a great listener. So you didn't know you were going to be quizzed today, and this was part of your first lesson of development and fundraising, but it was. So I'm going to ask, does anybody in this room today know, where did I take my first missions trip? That's right. Oh, wow, we have a lot of good listeners, all in the front row, just saying. Do you know where did I visit?
Orphanage.
An orphanage, that's right. And how many years did I spend in grant making? 20 years. 11 with the tribe, that's right. So we're starting to see, right now we're building a relationship, you know a little bit about me, but it's time for people to know a little bit about you. So we're gonna take the next 4 minutes and you're gonna turn to your partner next to you and you're gonna share your purpose, your story, why you do the work you do. I'm gonna set a timer because they have me on the clock here and I wanna make sure that I am mindful of it, but I'm gonna set this timer for 4 minutes, so make sure you're also a good listener and give your partner the other 2 minutes, right? And you're gonna share your story. Please begin. Wow, well, you both are impressive. I think you're going to do well in your fundraising and development career. But right, and that is the donor story. Steve is the donor. Steve is the donor. Dr. Laura is the donor. Aaron is the donor. Everyone in this room, everyone you come across is the donor, right? Everyone who is in love with and engaged with your story, loves that you listen to their story and their passions, and loves what you do. They first fall in love with you as a person before they fall in love with your organization, which is an interesting, right, catch. But part of this, right, how do you build it into a system? So the best thing you could have if you don't, is a spreadsheet at minimum, right? But if you have some kind of like online management system, I remember when they asked me, how are we going to build this out? There's a lot of information you're trying to collect in here. What is the purpose of it? And I said, imagine when you're dating someone, but then you fall in love, and that's a different level of relationship. And you say, I want to know their favorite color and their birthday, and I got to remember the anniversary, and how to console them in times of sorrow, and all the important things that will happen over this lifetime. It is the same thing you want to capture in this system, is the relationship, because now we're going to develop a lot of them. We're going to be in love with a lot of people in our community and hope that they're in love with us too. And so we began to build this system that would collect all this data that was very genuine, right? That in a very genuine way, which is the most important part. But what else do you want to do when you love someone? You say, okay, I also feel like protective over that person, right? I want to make sure that they're in the best hands. If they give $1 somewhere, I want to make sure it's being stewarded the right way. So you have to make sure you have the right policies, procedures, investment policies, board policies in place. I talked about it at the Ask the Expert, right? There was a funder ready to give $500,000, and I said, please wait, we don't have the right systems in place. And they said, wow, thank you for that transparency, because I wanted to make sure that you were protected on both sides. I had an organization come ask for $10 million, and I said, okay, and they wanted to offer naming policies. This when I was in grant making. So they went back to the board and realized they didn't have anything in place for naming policy. In fact, it was a county organization and didn't realize they had to go all the way up to the board of supervisors to get that kind of approval to put a name inside their hospital, right? So knowing, right, what you have in place before you make the ask is incredibly important. Now, thankfully, I'd been in the role for many years and I understood my level of due diligence and what would be required from a legal perspective to protect a $10 million, $25 million gift, right? But the organization asking did not. Right, so it was a great opportunity for me to both then educate the nonprofit, educate the hospital, educate people in the community as to what makes a great ask. And a lot of that is having the right systems and the right policies in place before you ever make it. The next part of this journey is now we've built a relationship. And now you're curious about where I work and what I do, right? Because it must be a good organization if you're a good person and you work there. It's the patient's story. We actually haven't had the opportunity to collect a lot of patient stories. It's very personal to them. But I want to share this one. This is Judith's story. It's the first one that I had the opportunity to sit in an interview with. And it was 6 hours of meeting with Judith. Yeah. And we were able to capture it in 4 minutes. But it's one of the most powerful stories you'll have the opportunity to listen to while you're here at the conference.
I was living a normal, everyday life, and I ended up sick. I go to a doctor. Well,
I'm going to pause because we don't see Judith. Let's see. I'm going to take the... There we go. I'll just close it for now and reopen it.
They told me fixing it meant surgeries. They didn't know how many surgeries, but surgery. 9 surgeries in, I was 82 pounds soaking wet. I went to the clinic that they advised me to go to after my surgeries. Me and my daughter sitting there talking. He walks in and he goes, what drug are you on? Anyone that's 82 pounds soaking wet has to be on a drug. I'm like, no, sir. I've never even drank. I've raised 5 kids. And never once did I ever feel like there was something I could not do. But that day, I could not get my dignity back. That day was the day that I felt like I wanted to take my life. My kids didn't know. No one really knew. But I knew. And I knew I needed help. The nurse comes back in. They give me the medicine and I'm on my way. My son, as we come out of the parking lot, he says, Mom, what about this clinic? And I was like, oh, son, Mommy had enough. I don't want to go see another doctor. And he was like, for me, Mom. 4 days later, they called me, said, oh, he wants to see you. So when I came in, he said, hello, Judy. And he just looked me in my face. And his smile and his demeanor was just like, you're important. And then he came over, he pulled the chair up and he said, I know you're gonna be good. And he says to me, he says, do you mind if I pray with you? First thing I started to do was to cry because I thought, no, can't nobody have a belief like me. Get out of here. And so he says, no, I'm serious. I want my kids to understand there are people out there that actually care, that love you, that want to see you do better, that want to see you get better. You know what?
How can we help you?
Yes,
right?
Those are your favorite words. How can we help you?
And you're going to be okay.
And you said you're going to be just
You're going
fine.
to be just fine. That's right.
And that whole clinic, the ladies in the front, as soon as I walk in, they know my name. And the doctors I have now are amazing. I thank God every day for that. I thank God every day for the doctors, the nurses, the staff. I think the one thing that you gave me that nobody else gave me was you told me that God is all over.
Yeah.
And no matter what I'm going through, what I'm doing, always remember that. Without SAC, I probably wouldn't be here. I would probably be one of those people that left their kids too soon. That's what SAC Health gave me. They gave me that voice to say, you know what? I belong somewhere.
You're a blessing, right? You're a blessing. You've been a blessing to so many people.
SAC Health has given people of this community somewhere to feel like they belong. And I love it. I don't think I would have been here without them.
What you don't hear in that video, but what Judith shared, so I can share with you today, is that before Judith walked into that appointment, she was beyond broken. A week before that appointment, she had received a phone call that her daughter had been murdered trying to escape human trafficking. So she walked in, 9 surgeries, not even 100 pounds, physically in a broken state. A daughter who had just been murdered, spiritually, mentally, in a broken state of grief. And she was met by a physician who racial stereotyped her for her condition. She was not met with the love and grace of Jesus Christ. But SAC Health had the opportunity to rectify that in her and see the broken spirit. And the first thing she heard when she walked in through that door, before she ever made it into an exam room, was, "Can I pray for you?" And it changed Judith's life. Judith is now in a healthier state and thriving. But we share this story not just here today and not just with our donors, but we share it across the organization because Judith's story is actually the most important story, even more important than mine and yours, right? Is why we do this. So we want to talk also about the organizational story, right? So now we know who you serve, but what makes you want to do that? How did the organization start? Now I'm curious, right? So the history, right? The history of SAC Health started as a free clinic in the 1960s. A student and a physician who says, wow, there's a lot of need in our community and it's not being filled. We had an Air Force base close in our community and there were a lot of veterans left there uncared for and also their families. And so they embarked on this mission to provide free healthcare. Years later, in the 90s, it would become officially Social Action Corp, how we get the name SAC, have its first official clinic. It initially started in the basement of churches where they would hang curtains, right? And this is how the faith starts to become incorporated into the work. It later, in the 2000s, would become a lookalike, then eventually a federally qualified healthcare center. And then, was it about 5 years ago, Dr. Laura received the religious designation? Yeah, about 5 years ago, making sure that Christ was at the center of the work. But, I think about the organization, but what was most impressive about not just the history and being able to keep the mission at core was its leadership. At a time where many organizations were laying off and funding cuts were happening, and we were even told we can expect as much as 20 to 40% cuts into the budget at that time when we were all uncertain about, in California, we call it Medi-Cal, right? Medicaid across the country. And I remember asking leadership, and we're in a meeting, like, people are like, is this the time to pull back? And they said, absolutely not. It's the time to do the right thing. And it's time to step up and invest more in our community. They had just purchased a 280,000 square foot building with, $85 million loan hanging over the head and said, and on top of this, anytime there's a net, we're going to give a 10% tithe into a foundation that actually furthers that mission and deepens it. So I got to sit across panels and talk about hope and the courage and the boldness of leadership when they step up and step out in faith, and when they lead with the love of Jesus Christ in their heart, when the community is in fear and times are uncertain and there's political things happening and people sitting on both sides of the aisle in one room. Jesus is the answer, is what I got to say on that panel. It's the thing that no one expected, right? They were looking for the technical advice. I hope you still sat in those other ones because it was still great technical advice. It's what drew funders to SAC Health. That courage to step out in boldness, because they knew that while things were crumbling and organizations will go away, this organization is going to be standing here another 100 years plus. This is where, if they're doubling down, then we're going to double down in them. It's this scripture here that I think says it well. It's our CFO who brought it up when someone says, is this the time to give more? He says in Malachi 3:10, bring the full tithe into the storehouse so that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord of hosts. See if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out for you blessings without measure. Now, what we didn't see coming was that word was resonating in the community about who SAC Health was, and this light that it was shining inside of this place across its leadership, across its employees. And what drew was the deepening of relationships and what would eventually steward a $10 million gift, right? In 1.5 years, having never done philanthropy or formal marketing, Judas was the first story ever told, right? We were able to collectively raise $10.6 million in that first year. It was like a miracle. God's outpouring a blessing. When we came with that tithing, that leap of faith, when we could have very easily said, this is not the time. I think God saw those acts of obedience in that servant's heart, and he blessed it in abundance. It's hard not, because what did I say in the beginning? The most important takeaway was that our God is still in the business of doing and answering. That's right. 10 million was from a single donor. The tribe that I had worked at for 11 years was the $10 million donor. We also have one of the tribal members who sit on our board and on our foundation board. That board member also gave a $500,000 gift of his own to establish our chapel and naming of the chapel. And the other 100,000, which I am the most proud of, 80% of that came from employees across SAC Health. 80% of our employees give. Because at the heart of philanthropy is generosity. And I tell those other 20% who are just like, woo, times are tight. I understand. You give of your time, your talent, and your treasure when you can, right? But they all give their time and talent, and everyone leads there with this open heart. And across our team is this ability to put themselves in somebody else's shoes, right? They tell themselves, okay, if I was that person walking through the door, how would I want to be treated? So we make sure that that story that we're telling about SAC Health lives and is embodied in each of our employees. We share Judith's story at new employee orientation. There's rarely a dry eye, right? Aaron gets to do some of them as well. Dr. Lohr shares about the miracles, the slides where I think we're running out of room, right, to talk about the miracles and of all the prayers that have been answered. We have an evergreen pamphlet that shares a universal message about SAC Health, including its philanthropy. We once a week meet as an entire building inside of SAC Health, and we get to share different things about what's happening across the organization. I got to share about the foundation and philanthropy. I remember when people left there thinking about their purpose and why they are here, right? And the generosity of their time and their talent. So many people came after and said, wow, it just reignited my purpose. They were like, I felt like I was in church. I'm like, me too, So it was just such a blessing to be able to share the heart of the work that everyone is doing. So I'm going to ask, does everyone remember here a time where someone was generous with you? A time, whether it was their time, their talent, or their treasure. And I'm going to ask you to turn to that same neighbor, and I'm going to give you 4 minutes. And you're going to be able to share about how that's impacted you. All right, let's begin. All right, I'm going to ask your attention back to the front of the room. All right, thank you so much. All right. Let's see, everyone's looking down because they don't want to be picked on next. That's right. Steve and Steve are off the hook. We're going to ask Aaron. Aaron, we're going to pick on Aaron. Everyone, please welcome Aaron. He is the member of SAC Health, the philanthropy team. He oversees our government and public affairs. Aaron has been a great addition. He joined, is it like 4 months ago now, I think, officially. Aaron has been a wonderful addition. And Aaron, if you would either share your story of how someone's generosity impacted you, or your teammate's story?
Sure. I was thinking about them.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. And you said something really key. I thought about, you can prepare a lot of cool slide decks and have a lot of information on there, and all of it is helpful. And I'm here, after the presentation, and even if you want to email me, I do have all those things around stewardship matrix and all the important pieces, tangible pieces of philanthropy you might need. But you said the most important thing was you remember how he made you feel. And that's what people remember. You won't really remember 100% of everything I said today. You may not remember my story. You may not remember exactly Steve's story, but you will remember how he made you feel in the moment when they spent that time or that generosity or that moment listening to you. Out of all the things you will remember across this is the connection you made, right? And the different connections you made in this room and outside of this room because of how somebody made you feel. It's the same thing with donors, our grant makers, our funders. We're all people at the end of the day, and we all are here to serve a purpose. Anybody who is working, whether it's in government, whether it's across a family, or whether it's in private family, most people are in these types of industries because they want to see something good happen for their community. Getting to the heart of what that is and finding connection and finding alignment and finding something you can do together, right, is the most important. We talked about this team alignment, right? Making sure that the message gets out there, that everyone, and it's everyone's responsibility. So as I embarked on this journey, becoming the executive director, you start to see what are the needs across the organization. We said the first one was marketing, right? We needed a marketing person to be able to tell these beautiful stories. The second was when you realize, you said, okay, there's a lot of political uncertainty happening. Solidifying these relationships in my community in Sacramento and DC are more important than they've ever been. In the history of Sac Health, that actually had not been the case. In the history of nonprofits, that wasn't really the case. There was those who were like, oh, you're really great at advocacy, so you get that money, but I'm still good with how I operate. Now, advocacy is essential. It has become an essential part of the mission. So Aaron was the next hire, right? Public policy and government affairs. And Aaron has just blown us out of the water with how he so beautifully and eloquently lives in these relationships. And mind you, right, we're in a climate that is completely polarized. And it is a God-given gift that you can have conversations on any side of any aisle. And Aaron has truly been called to Sac Health, and he has truly stepped into that calling, and you can see it when he lives that out and he embodies it in his work. And because of his efforts, we said, wow, we're doing really great here. We need to bring on another person who will also help us steward some of this blessing that's pouring in. And we brought on a grants and philanthropy partner position. Because while it's great to receive the blessing, you want to make sure that you're living up to the expectations, the reporting, actually living out those metrics in real life, right? So now we're a team of 3 plus a grant writer who was at the core a lot of this beginning. She's been there for, I think, 20 years, working with Sac Health, really more. And, it's funny because she always says, I'm just a grant writer. And I'm like, nobody's just in anything, but you are the most fabulous grant writer because she understands relationship and connection. And all of the major gifts that I had ever recommended in our community, she had a hand in writing because I trusted her in our relationship. And if she said it was good, it was good. From $5,000 gifts to $25 million gifts. Her hand was in all of those major gifts because we had a trusted relationship. I trusted her to be transparent when something wasn't going right, and not to anyone's fault. Sometimes systems break, right? And we work together to fix them. Your grant writer and their relationship with the program officer or anyone you're seeking funding for or the donor is one of the most important relationships that will happen inside of your organization. But all of this, right, still stemming from relationship. And because of those relationships, we had the opportunity. It was so congressional directed spending. We had a 1 week notice that these applications were coming out, that we'd have the ability to apply for funding. We were a brand new team. Aaron then 3 months, Marissa 1 week in. I'd never written a government grant in my life. Thank God for Andrea, who had done it for 20 years, right? We said, okay. And we had the opportunity to write applications, each of them $6 million to the tune of $90 million. Now we know we won't necessarily get all 90 million, but we gave ourselves the best chance. So we know maybe about 12 million of that is looking promising, right? And in the middle of all of this, right, this is God. This is really God. Because remember, I'd never done this. Aaron's new on the job. Marissa's a weekend, right? But it was interesting when we had finished signing the $10 million gift agreement. And by the way, that took a year from the time the first conversation happened till it was signed, maybe a year and a half. I said, okay, God, now what? I feel like I've asked all my friends all I can ask, I'm out of friends here, And I said, it was a humbling moment. I remember just sitting there in prayer and saying, God, okay, is that it? I know you called me. What else is next? And I said, I'm going to just trust in faith, God. If you brought me here, you will open the next door. That same week, I got a call that a family foundation had a $3 million grant that fell through. And did we have a proposal we could submit for $3 million? And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was just overwhelming, the opportunities, those applications that came in a week. And I tell our CFO, I was like, I think I should slow down the prayers. He's like, please don't slow down the prayers. I think they're working, And, and I said, but because God is in the business of doing miracles and answering prayers. And so I still wanted you to know that in all of this relationship building, there's still metrics behind this, right? They still have to trust that you are doing the work and that you are measuring it. And I want to leave you with this final slide to kind of give you a window into there are different types of funding, but also what they're actually looking for. So if you are going after a government grant, they're going to have a strong emphasis on data and successful metrics. They want you to prove that you have done this. This is a whole nother world and a whole nother animal and a whole nother, you might exhaust yourself in the administrative work of operating these grants. But for those who can do it well and can navigate it, there is a lot of opportunity. And while it looks like it's dwindling and going away, the funding has just simply shifted, right? We had a conversation with Monty from HHS, right? And he's saying, we're talking to him about all of the funding that's going away because they have decided that certain medical professionals are no longer medical professionals, right? And he's like, go after workforce dollars. It doesn't matter to them what profession they're in. There is a way to still bring in the money. It has just shifted, right? And so having those relationships are important because you want to find out where they have shifted to make the right ask. The second is private foundations. They place an importance on systems change, data, and evaluation. And so if you don't have those things in place, it will challenge you to work with a private foundation. That's why that $3 million grant fell through and they came to SAC Health because they said, wow, once we got inside, they had a great story to tell. Their marketing was sure on it. Their CEO was I felt this relationship. And then when we got in, they didn't tell me how it was going to change anything. They didn't even have any metrics or data or an evaluation process to tell me how this will make impact. That's important when you hit those higher level gifts. When you're looking at major gifts, so a donor who has the capacity, and major is different. I think major is 10 million 10,000. Like if someone came and asked me for 10,000, I would go, ooh, that's major to me, right? So major is different for everyone, but that is the ability to strengthen a relationship. And when I really think about major gifts, a lot of those happen over a period of time, right? You see that, they gave 10 million or $500,000 or 10,000, but a lot of those are structured over multi-year so that they have a lot of time to be able to give that gift, right? I give my gifts over time because that is the best way I can give philanthropy. And then it's to individual donors, it's that personal connection. But I say in all the donor relationships, this is the most important one. We talked, right, about 80% of SAC Health employees give. To me, that is the most important gift we will ever receive. We're going to have new conversations with the 500 residents that rotate through SAC Health. And the first thing the person told me was, you know, they're broke, right? And they probably have a lot of debt. Are you sure you want to talk to them? And I said, yeah, because if $5 is meaningful to them, then $5 is meaningful to me. And one day, I think they won't be broke. Right? So I wanted to leave you a little bit with insight. Also, my contact information. I know you have to roll into your next session and someone has to come set up. So I'm happy to even step outside the door to answer questions. But please feel free to call. That's my cell phone number. I don't know my desk number. I just give my cell number to everybody. So feel free to call me, email me. Please stay connected. Thank you so much for your time today. And I think I have like 3 minutes for questions, right? Yeah, 3 minutes.
Can you talk about your individual connections and how you maintain those with such a small team that you have?
Yeah, I think it's important to go deep and not wide. So it was interesting, when I came on, we had a consultant and he did a feasibility study, or I guess I should say he attempted to do a feasibility study. And he's like, your list is really short, you know, for everybody, like across the organization. You know, are you sure you want to do an $85 million campaign? And I said, well, show me the list, right? And it was really this ability to go deeper into those relationships rather than wide. And when you do that, you realize those who are already giving, or those who have a passion to give, or who are volunteering, or know so much about your organization, they are likely the ones in these times of uncertainty who are going to step up and give bigger. And so I actually don't maintain hundreds of relationships because that would be impossible for a year and a half, right? I was a team of 1 and now we're a team of 3. But it is the ability to make deep and meaningful connection, like the specific donor who sits on our board, right? Like, it's one of my best friends in the world. And I deeply care and love for him and his family. And I know when he's going to run a race and what his favorite book is and when his birthday is, and because that's just the connection that we've made over the years. And I know in professional settings, they talk a lot about, you know, like there are certain lines, and I do my best to keep those professional pieces. But there's just the way God moves and brings people into your life that don't always make sense, and you can't always fit in a box or put a number to them. And, you know, and I never asked that person for a gift. They just came and said, hey, how's it going at SAC Health? I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it there. And everybody's so nice. Remember, that was one of my requirements. And I was like, and everybody's just on fire for Jesus and the work they're doing. And the leadership is so emotionally connected. Like, I love it. And he's like, wow, how can I help? That was it. He extended the invitation. I never thought about asking him. I've never actually asked, right? Most people will come, they just see the light that is happening. They see this beacon and they want to be a part of it any way they can. And that's the gift. That's the gift. It's the light you show into the world when people say, what's happening there? What's happening in you? Why are you excited when everyone around you is like filled with doom and gloom and fear and the news? And I was like, I don't know. I don't watch the news. I think that's what helps. You know, if it's important, someone will tell me. But, you know, I think that really is the secret sauce, right? To how you engage. You share with them the hope and the light and the work and how you are serving. And you make sure that that is resonating across your organization. And you will see a change. Yeah. I hope that a little bit answered your question. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes, Steve.
We all would like you to share the contact information of that 500 million.
Oh, 500,000. Sorry, I say million. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That works too. That works too. Yeah. All right. Thank you all. I'm going to leave time for the other presenter. Thank you.